Let's get started. All right, everyone, welcome to Dev SuperPowers. I'm going to be talking about Bootstrap today. My name is Ben Cull, and I guess the first thing I want to talk about is Dev SuperPowers itself. The idea of webinars like this is to just get stuck into the code. It's not so much a presentation, it's just jump in and do it and really learn by just watching it and maybe even following along if you can. So as I mentioned, today's one is on Bootstrap. I'm going to take you through probably starting right at the beginning and how it's installed and just getting up and running. And then we'll go all the way to hopefully getting some pretty cool things running. Probably Modals is my favorite part. But with that said, let's fire everything up and get started. And the first thing I like to do when firing up Visual Studio is file new project. I like to file new project a lot. It's just a nice way to see what's happening, keep up to date with things. See the new sort of like Identity 2 is out now, and it's nice to play with that and just see what scaffolds sort of just comes up, because it seems to be changing all the time. And it's nice to just keep doing new projects to see what is new. Okie doke. Now today I'm going to be doing an MVC project. MVC is my favorite, my preferred web application framework. And with that said, you can use Bootstrap with anything. It's just it's a client-side library. It's mostly just some JavaScript and a lot of CSS. It's a good way to keep things consistent, and it really helps developers sort of get up and running quickly, because you're always using the same classes. You're always sort of maintaining this you're always coding in the same way, basically. And it doesn't matter if it's just you on the team or if there's 4 or 5 guys. You know that using a framework like this, everyone's going to build their UIs in a sort of consistent way using the same pieces. And that really helps sort of teams, and even working with other teams, helps everyone stay consistent, which is good. Okie doke, file, new project. We are going to jump into a web application. I will put this into Dev SuperPowers. And we'll call it 1, or maybe just Bootstrap. Okay, so like I said, MVC is the framework of choice for me. I'm just going to whack that in. I'm not going to put any tests or API, anything like that. This Windows Azure thing is pretty cool. You should definitely check that out if you have an Azure account. So while that's spinning up, let me just sort of describe what's happening here. Some of you would most likely know that when you click File New Project, it's going off and it's installing a bunch of NuGet packages into your project. Now they're local to your machine, so you don't need the internet to go File New Project. But one of the NuGet packages is Bootstrap. And what that does is it plonks the JavaScript files and the CSS files needed into the correct spots that Microsoft wants you to put them in, which will be content for the CSS and scripts for the scripts. Go figure. And let's start. Now that our sort of project's spun up, first thing I'm going to do is not touch anything. I'm going to build and run. And this is just to show you what you get out of the box. So for those of you that don't know, Bootstrap is actually built into the latest versions of Visual Studio via those NuGet packages. But yeah, when you start a new application, it's already in Bootstrap. So the sort of screen we're looking at here, it should be familiar. They've used the same sort of default application screen for some time now. But the cool thing to note is this is all just Bootstrap here. So you've got your nice Navbar at the top. The content is just that default stuff. You get your responsiveness out of the box, which is really cool. We'll take a closer look at that in a minute. But the thing to take away from this is that there's very little CSS, actually custom CSS that is, to make this site display the way it is. And what we'll do is we'll just jump in and I'll show you that. So I'm going to start by just opening site.css just to show you that that's it. That's all the CSS we have. And this even isn't really needed, especially this one highlighted here. The max width is set by the default project to keep text boxes nice and in a nice size, but that actually goes against what Bootstrap wants. Bootstrap wants form elements to fill the space that it's given, and you use columns to shrink them down, which we'll get to in a minute as well. But the first thing to show you is just that there's not much CSS here. We're actually going to delete it all, and it's not going to look as nice to start with. So our padding gets pushed up, and we lose a little bit of nicety there. But the point is here, no CSS. And what we'll do, probably first, I might even delete that file. I'll show you some less, which is very nice. OK, deleted. So here are the two Bootstrap CSS files that it's added for us. And I'll just open up the scripts as well so you can see where they went. So we've got bootstrap.js and bootstrap.min.js, of course just the minified version of the other one. And we've got the Bootstrap CSS and the Bootstrap min CSS, of course, minified again. So that's where the two sets of files go, and that's it. That's all you need. And you've got all the power of Bootstrap at your fingertips then. Okie doke. So I guess probably the first thing to take a look at is how these files are referenced. Now I'm not sure how many people have used the bundling config or the bundling system, but if you jump into app start bundle config, you'll see a couple of these script bundles and style bundles as well. So by default, you'll take a look and see that Bootstrap has been put into the script bundle, and we've also got Bootstrap here for the style bundle. So that's a way of referencing the files, but where you actually put them on your website will be in your layout. Where are we going? Views, shared, layout. OK, and you'll see up the top here, styles.render content/CSS. That outputs everything that we just referenced in the bundle config. And we've also got the scripts render bundles/bootstrap. One key thing to note here is when you're using these bundles, you notice that the CSS ones, this path, that's a custom path. You can put whatever you want there. It's like it doesn't physically exist. It's just a logical path we're putting in. But you'll notice that the CSS is actually in the content folder still, which is a real folder. And that's so that all of the CSS that references other files and references image paths, it's so that relative path structure stays the same. If you put it into some random non-existent folder, it would break a lot of those things. But luckily, scripts don't suffer from that same problem, so you can just put it into a made-up folder called bundles, and it's fine. Right, OK, so that's how you sort of reference it. Now, I guess we'll get stuck into the cool thing, which is the grid system. Now, the grid system is my favorite part. It's basically what keeps all your content in these columns and rows and niceties, and it gives you a responsive sort of look and feel out of the box. So I guess let's jump straight into the code and just take a look. We'll fire up index.cs HTML, and we'll take a look at this. So the code I've got highlighted here, this row and this getting started stuff, is this bit in here. And I guess where we'll start is with rows and columns. So a row is a way of segmenting your content vertically. So looking at the page here, this is a row, this thing up here is a row, and if I wanted to have more paragraphs and stuff underneath, you just create a new row every time you want to put columns in it. So every row has at least one column, and the columns help segment your data, your content horizontally. So the way this works is using a 12-segment system. So you've got 12 segments to play with. And what that lets you do then is divide up your columns from that 12. So we've got 3 columns of 4 segments each, and that makes up our 12. So column MD4, that gets us a column here, you'll notice this little MD qualifier. That's for screen sizes, which I'll get into in just a sec. But anyway, let's just fire up a new row and I'll show you how this all works. So if we put in a row and then we put in a Cull MD12, that's just one single column. So the heading we put in here, along with any content, will just be it'll just be one whole screen's width. Yep, here we go. And so if I had more content, that would just take up that whole screen. And then if we wanted to say, I don't know, we'll copy one of these over and we'll make them 6 and 6. And there you go. So you get half-half, because again, we're making up that 12 segments. And you can use any combination as long as it adds up to 12, you're fine. And now I was mentioning the screen size qualifier here. One of the powerful things about Bootstrap is the out-of-the-box responsiveness. And probably the key thing here to take a look at, and I'll just grab my window so you can see. We target screen sizes for the content. So you can go and change the way that everything's laid out based on the viewport or the screen size of the device that's looking at your website. And I'll just show you the sizes. You've got large, which is usually desktop PCs. And then you'll watch just as we start to get too small for the content, it'll click and get smaller. Yep, there it goes. So the next one down is medium or MD. And that's, again, for smaller PCs, maybe tablets or something like that. We'll just scroll it down again. And it goes to small. And small, of course, is either like a landscape phone or a portrait tablet, some portrait tablets. And then it will click down to extra small. And that's, of course, for phones, both some phones landscape and all phones portrait, basically. And so that's just a nice way. And you do notice that despite us having these column structures here with 3 columns there and 2 columns there, when we get too small for it, you notice that they all just wrap around and all our content still looks really nice. It's all laid out properly. It's all sequentially sort of just moved itself around. And even when we go down to really small, it just, resizes itself to fit, which is really quite nice. All right, let's move straight into some more exciting stuff. Let's jump into creating forms. Now you get a bit of a double whammy here. This is going to be good. I'm just going to quickly show you scaffolding in Visual Studio while I'm here. So the first thing I'm going to do, so the target here is create a form. We're just going to, I don't know, username, password, and remember me maybe, or something like that. So the first thing I'll do is create a model just to hold that data. Initializing templates. There we go. Okay, so we'll call this Ben's model. And in Ben's model, there is prop. We'll say a username. We'll go with password. Again, we're not actually going to use this, but and we'll have a bool remember me. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Build. So one of the cool things you can do is say, hey, I want to create a new view. So we'll just throw it in home controller. That'll do for now. I'm going to call it the Ben view. Oh no, I'll make it more sensible. I'll call it sign in. And you'll notice this template thing here. And this is the powerful thing about scaffolding is you can just use one of these to automatically spin up a form with Bootstrap styling in it for you. So I'm going to choose edit. We'll pick our model, Ben's model. If you've got EF or something, you can plug into your data context, but we won't do that today. And we'll use the default layout. Cool, so there's a bunch of stuff that's just gone and done for us. Probably the coolest thing is there's references to the model, It spins up a form for us. It's got the anti-forgery token in it. And you'll notice a bunch of class names scattered throughout this whole code. The important ones to take a look at here for us are going to be form horizontal. They're going to be control label. You'll see some columns here. Form control, that's important. Basically every class name you can see here is worth paying attention to. Probably the key ones to start with is we'll look at horizontal, a form group, and a form control. So without touching anything, actually, while I remember, we'll just jump into the home controller as well. And public action result. And we want to spin up a sign in. Okie dokie. So we'll just run that now. We'll jump into sign in. Okay, so what have we done here? What you can see is a form that was just created for me. We've got the two, username, password, and remember me. It already knows that strings are text boxes, that a boolean is a checkbox. We've got a save button, go back. So it's done all this really, a lot of legwork for us. If you've got a big CRUD application, you're going to be writing lots of forms. This is awesome. Now you notice that the text box is huge. We'll take care of that in a minute. But you get these cool glowy things as well. Everything's laid out nicely. Let's jump into how that actually works. So the key to this one is we're using a horizontal form with the class form horizontal. And all that means is you get your labels on the left and you get your inputs on the right, and a nice save button at the bottom. There are other forms. You can have them just sequential or inline even, and we might take a look at those in a sec. The next important thing here is a form group. Now form group, sort of if we throw up the Google tools here, I hover over form group, so you can see it highlighted there. It's basically, it's almost like a row, but it's just a way of containing one input element and any associated labels or help text or anything like that. And one thing we might just show you is how to sort of make these text boxes sensibly sized. And you'll see the reason for their massiveness is because of this Cull MD10 here. So remembering that 12 segments makes up your entire screen width, we've got 2 segments here for the label, and we've got 10 segments for the text box. Well, it seems a bit much. Let's knock it down to like 4. And you might be saying, but Ben, it has to add up to 12. Well, it technically does. You can't go over 12. It'll start mucking things up. But luckily you can cheat, and you can actually make it less than 12, and it's just going to float to the left. So this empty columns on the right here, I just ignored. So we'll do that for the other one as well. 5 looks pretty good. Oh, sorry. 4 looks pretty good. Give our checkbox 4. And our save button 4, why not? So refreshing, and there we go. We have a nice form. Probably, it's a good one to show you as well. Form control, we've got a checkbox, we've got the button. That's probably a good thing to focus on as well. So the thing that makes your label float nicely is control label. The thing that makes your text box look nice is form control. So you're going to be using that a lot, control label and form control. One of the interesting cases is the button and the checkbox, so we'll dive into those. The checkbox, you'll notice that we basically give it a container as our column to put the input into. You need to wrap your checkboxes in a div class checkbox, and then with the editor 4, it'll spit out basically a checkbox like so. Let's just whack it in here, input type checkbox. And that's all you really need. And it lines itself up nicely, etc. So that's all that editor 4 is doing. Probably one of the cooler things as well. Oh, we'll take a look at button. So the thing that you would normally see, and I'll whack one in just to show you. Input type, I'll make this one just a button so it doesn't do anything. A test button. Your standard buttons look like that. Not very nice looking. These Bootstrap buttons look really nice, and it's so easy to get them to look that way. All you need is class Btn and class Btn-default. And basically, your Btn is the base class that styles it sort of consistently and you know, the base styles. And your button default, or Btn-default, makes it look like this nice sort of white, easy, you know, a default button. So that's how you do that. Oh, that's a cool tip. So you'll notice that our overall form is that large. So that's our 12 columns there. But this save button little area here, if you have a look at that, we've got 4 columns wide, which you can see in blue. And that margin on the left there is an offset. And what you can do is you're not just stuck with all your columns, you know, pushed to the left. You can actually offset them by however many columns you want to, and then specify the width. So our button, to get it to line up with the actual form controls up here, we basically just say, hey, our label column is width 2, so we're going to offset this save button column by 2 as well. And what that looks like in the code is Cull MD for medium, because we're still targeting that screen size, offset 2, so it moves it over 2 columns, and then Cull MD4, which makes it 4 segments wide. So that's really handy. You can create all sorts of layouts, you know, tons, just with offsetting and moving things around. Right, let's take a look. Probably one of these surprise things is you'll notice that I haven't really written much code, but I can click save and it will work. But what I'm trying to show you is if I go to the model and I say that these are required, we'll get that one in there. So I'm just adding a couple of required attributes to my model just to say that, you know, you've got to fill this in. So when you build and then you refresh this page, you click save, you'll notice that the username, you get the automatic validation, and that's unobtrusive validation. So it's just, you know, it's not actually submitting anything. It's going, whoop, no, hang on, you can't submit yet. You haven't filled these out, and then when you type it in, it disappears. So that's thanks to a combination of unobtrusive validation and the scaffolding, which makes it really cool. Right, so we've done text box, a checkbox. We've taken a look at buttons. You've seen a horizontal form. I'll just quickly throw in a vertical form so you can see what that looks like as well. We'll spin one up. Don't really need a container class. But what we'll do is we'll say form group, and I'll put in a label, and I'll give that class control label, and I'll say test label, and then I'll whack in a text box. Text class equals, now we're going to give it form control, as we do for all the inputs. So taking a look at that, let's just see what happens. There we are. So you can see that, again, forms and form controls and form groups always want to expand to fill their space. So the way to bring them down is to put them in a column. Now, we are basically in a column at the moment. So what I'll do is say row, and I'll say div class Cull MD12, and this is just to give you just to show typically how a form will be. So you'll usually be in a column like this. So we've got a row, we're in a column. Now you can either make it smaller up here, and that does it. But more than likely you'll have other content floating around this. So what you can also do is throw a column in here. Although I may be mistaken. Let's just take a quick look to see if that works. No, you can't. There you go. That's good. So when using inline forms, it's important that your form group is there, and that's just to separate out your controls. But you've got to make sure that those are inside a column of whatever size you'd like. And that lets us basically do 6, and if I wanted another one, I could have them next to each other, like so. So these are your sort of just sequential forms. That's what it looks like when you do it by default. And this top one here is your horizontal form. All right, let's move on to something a little bit more exciting as well. We'll create a new, oh no, we'll just keep going down the page. Let's do that, shall we? So, new row. Something pretty cool I'd like to show you is the fact that you can append buttons and other bits and bobs to the inputs as you go. And this is probably just about the best time to show you where to go to figure out, what these classes are if you can't remember them off the top of your head. Because I'm starting to reach the limit of what's in my head at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll go to getbootstrap.com. And this is where you'll find absolutely all information you can about Bootstrap. It's really, really well documented. So what we're going to do is take a look at input groups. And essentially it's just a text box and then the button sort of attached to it. Similar to like a search box. All right, input groups. So you've got these ones where you can sort of use an @ symbol and that sort of thing. But the one I'm looking for is going to be a button like this. Text box and a button. So we'll start out by grabbing our input group. We'll attach the button to it as well. And we'll put our text box in. So let's do that. First of all, we'll spin up a big column. We'll just make it 12. Then we'll create a div input group. Then we'll put another div. Actually, we'll start out with the input. We'll make this 6. So it's not too big. Always remember your form control. Okay, so we've put in our form control, then we've got a span with input group button. And inside there we put in our actual button. And we'll put in our class Btn default, and we'll say, hey, I'm a button. And that's all we need. Might put type button just in case. So let's go back to our site and take a look. And there it is. There's our text box, there's hey, I'm a button, and you'll notice that the button expands to however big it needs to be, but the entire control, or the entire input group, stays within that 6-segment column, which is part of the beauty of Bootstrap. Is just no matter what you're trying to do, it'll all just fit itself in nicely and line up nicely. So you can put useful things like Go or search or something in there, and it'll look really quite nice. Probably a good thing to show you while I'm here, with these buttons, now you've noticed I've been putting button default. Now default is just a contextual sort of thing. It's sort of just a innocuous sort of button. It's just a default button, but you can also use these other contextual classes to bring color and bring context to your page. And so probably if this was my big call to action, I'd go with button primary. And what that does is it turns it into a big blue button. Of course, this is the default theme, but it's the sort of primary catch your eye call to action. Usually use default as a secondary. You've also got things like warning, which makes it yellow if you're going to do something that's not quite right. Danger, which makes it red. And you'll notice they're called things that are contextual. They're not called button red, button yellow. They're called warning and danger. And that allows your designers to sort of dictate what does warning mean. Is it a rainbow, or is it is it the typical sort of yellow sort of warning text? And that just stops things from getting out of sync where button yellow suddenly is green or something like that. And speaking of green, you've also got button success. And there it is. So those are the sort of contextual things you can do. And it's not just buttons. Everywhere you see default, you can substitute one of the other contextual colors or classes. And that goes for things like labels and alerts and stuff that we'll take a look at. But probably the next thing to show you, and this is really cool. I really like this. Again, I'm just going to keep going down the page with these rows, just because they're cool that way. Right, div class, we'll go Cull MD. This time we will go full width at 12. And what I want to show you is tables, and these are really cool, especially this syntax for getting them up and running. So you can type table, and I want a T head with a TR and a TH. And if I hit tab, that's gone and scaffolded all that sort of HTML, fiddly HTML for me, which is really cool, part of Visual Studio, one of the latest ones, probably any version of 2013. Could even be older, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So I'm going to put in person. I'm just going to make up a couple of columns here. I'll say age, and then I'll say available or something like that. And what I'll next do is, I can do this trick again, TD, is I'll say, Ben, I am 99 years old, and I am definitely available to do this talk. What were you thinking? We'll throw in another row, or another couple of rows just to show you. And I'll just go test and blah. So the key to this is take a look at what a table looks like without any styling. We've given it a column, but look, it's just jammed all that data off on the left there. What we're going to do now is throw in the table classes. Now again, like most things in Bootstrap, it's a pretty logical class that you add to something to make it look pretty. So in this one, we've got table, and you can see the IntelliSense there popping up all the different options I have. I'm going to put in table striped. That's my favorite one. And you watch that bottom one there. Suddenly, boom, come to life. I pretty much always use table striped for every table, and it just looks good and it just works, and I don't need to worry about formatting anything. A couple of cool tricks though to keep up your sleeve. If you use text right, again another Bootstrap class, and you whack that on your columns, bang, moves over for you. And so you can use text left and text right and text center to move inline elements around like that. And you can also use float left and float right to move block elements around the place as well. But yeah, that's just super cool, those table things. And probably another one, just another nice little thing in here. So I wanted to say a little bit of a contextual label, class label. And you notice the IntelliSense again popping up the different options I have in terms of these contextual classes. So I'm going to put in success, making sure I've got my base class and then my contextual class. I'm just going to say cool. And again, that's what you get with there. So that's labels, dead easy. There's so many of these things we just throw in a class and it works. All right, so we've gone through contextual colors, we've gone through labels. Another one is images. Now this is probably really interesting. I'm going to create a new row and a new column. And in this one, I'm going to put an image. Now I'll just go and grab a nice big image to show you what I'm talking about. We'll grab this toll logo. I'll just drop it in content for now. So when you go and reference this, this image, it's a big image, right? So even though I've said, you know, column 12, when I plug this in, it's massive. It's gone off the screen. It's huge. It's not, you know, conforming to my column. And there's this really awesome, super simple trick you can do, and this works out so well in so many situations, is if you just put image-responsive on your image, what that does is it just constrains the image to your columns. And again, don't abuse this by putting massive images into tiny columns. But it's super useful for if you're building little avatar showing things, so that you've got a nice big avatar on big desktops and you've got a small little avatar on small desktops, because it follows the column size and lets you do stuff like that, which is really cool. So definitely have a play with that one. All right, moving along, what we'll check out now, and again, just spin up my column. Actually, before I do that, probably one important thing is, I just mentioned targeting screen sizes. With these two test label ones, we'll just use this as an example. We've got them side by side, so they're column 6 and column 6. But as soon as we get down to small view size, you'll notice that they wrap around. And I just realized that I want to point out that when you're putting in, so we found the code here, when you're using this MD screen size, what it essentially means is up until that screen size, use this 6. So for medium and larger, you're going to need to use 6 segments. But as soon as you go smaller than medium, you just default to what you think is right, which is usually 12 segments. So if I actually change this to LG6 and LG6, it's only going to keep those this and this. It's only going to keep them side by side on large views. And as soon as I pop down to even just medium, it goes to full width. And that gives you a lot of power, because what you can do then is say, well, look, I want to go down to extra small 6. And if I just refresh, you'll notice, whoop, they're back again. And when you go down, they're still side by side. And when you go all the way down to the tiniest of tiny, they're still side by side. So I'm saying at XS, use 6, and it'll apply for larger things as well. And I guess that just is pretty cool, because what you can do now is say, look, I want it to be actually maybe 2/3, 1/3 when you get that small. So if I say 8 and 4, it's a bit of an abstract example. But now it's 2/3, 1/3. Or rather 3/4, no, 2/3, 1/3. And it stays that way all the way down. But let's say this is how I want it to look on small screens, but once you get up to here, I want it to be 6 and 6 again. So you can actually double up these classes. So I'm going to say at MD6 and MD6. So for extra small devices and larger, use 8 and 4 up until you get to medium, and then start using 6 and 6 and larger. So I'll refresh and show you what that looks like. So large size, we're using 6 and 6. Medium size, we're using 6 and 6. As soon as you get down to small, we're using 8 and 4. And extra small as well is 8 and 4. And so that's just one really cool trick that you can use. But moving right along, we'll go back down here to the column I freshly made. One of the cool things that I kind of use a lot are icons. And you do get icons out of the box with Bootstrap, but I'd like to show you a better one, in my opinion, better. And for this example, I'm going to create an add button. So button type, button. We're going to give this one a class of Btn, and then Btn, we'll go primary, just for fun. I'm going to say add new item. So here's my add new item button. Just as a quick throw in as well, you can also use sizes. And these apply to buttons and form elements as well. So I'm going button large, and that'll just make it a little bit bigger for me. There we go. But what I'd really like to see is like a little plus icon in here. Now the best way to do this is to jump over to fontawesome.io and go and download their toolkit basically. Now you can do it that way, and I'll just quickly show you some icons because that's really cool. Basically they're very flat style, so they suit the Microsoft Metro or design framework formerly known as Metro theming quite well, and there's just so many of these. They're so cool. You can get ones that spin. You've got all the currency, or a lot of currencies in there, a lot of text editor ones, directions especially, but there's just so many. So you can either download it like I've just done there, or even better is if you go to the Font Awesome CDN, and it should be under, Bootstrap CDN is the one I use. So you can get Bootstrap from here as well if you want. I'm going to jump over and grab Font Awesome. And then in my layout page, I'm just going to make a link. Oops. We'll go. And so that's not going to do anything, but that does just reference it. And once we've done that, come back. And I'll show you how to add these icons. So basically you use an I tag, and then you go class equals, and then it's FA for Font Awesome. And again, that's your base class. And then FA dash, and then whatever you wanted to find in here. So I'm going to use a plus symbol. So I'm just going to search for plus. There we go. That looks like a good one. It's called FA-plus. So in here I go FA-plus. Save, refresh, bing, there it is. So you get this icon. You can put them in buttons, in labels, in anywhere. And the cool thing is, because it's like a vector, because it's a font, sorry, Font Awesome, you can just style it using the same things you would use to style any old text. And I'll give you a bit of a demonstration of that just underneath. If I go, I'll whack it just in a paragraph to be safe, and I'm going to say I class Font Awesome, and then Font Awesome dash, I'll go with send. We'll show you what that looks like. A little paper aeroplane. Now it's just currently at the size of what your text would be. So if I be really dodgy and I just throw a style in here and say font size is 40 pixels, you can see that it's made that particular icon 40 pixels high. And you can do all sorts of things as well. You can go color. You can throw in your text shadow if you really want. And just a lot of really cool things. A lot of really cool things like that. And so here we'll have a red text shadowed slightly. Maybe let's bump that up. There we go. And so that's the kind of power you can do with Font Awesome. It's really cool. All right. Probably next thing to go through is the Navbar. This one's really cool. The Navbar is this guy at the top here. And really, Bootstrap sites, this is where it really works out quite well. We'll jump into the layout and take a look at the code. So you can see here, Navbar, of course, is the base class. And probably to follow along, a good thing to do would be to jump into getbootstrap.com, go to the components tag at the top, and then follow along at Navbar on the side here. Because you can see that, this is actually a much better example. You can see there's some links, there's some drop-down actions. You can put forms literally straight into the Navbar. Push them left, push them right, and again with your drop-downs. So looking at our one, you've got the Navbar, which is the base class again. Navbar inverse just makes it black instead of white, white being or rather it makes it dark instead of light, light being the default theme. And Navbar fixed top, which just means it's going to stay up the top, no matter where we are, in it like a fixed fashion. So even though we scroll, it's still up there. There's so many options for that. You can just leave it at the top, you can have it fixed, you can do what you like. We have the container class. Now again, the container is what keeps your content centered in the page. If we didn't have a container, we wouldn't have our content, or rather our 12 segments would span the entire screen. And so what I'll do is I'll just highlight that for you. There you go, container. So you can see that container basically keeps your content in the center, and it margins off the sides, and that changes size based on your device width as well. So we've got our container keeping all of our content centered in here. Even though the bar goes all the way across, the content will stay in the middle. And probably the tricky thing here is the way they sort of collapse down the menu. So you'll notice we've got a Navbar header, and we've got this button with 3 icons in it, and you're like, what's this? And you've got the application name. So we'll say Ben's application. And when you take a look at that, there we go, Ben's application, just put it at the top there. But where's this icon with the 3 bars and stuff like that? What you've got to do is minimize your screen size. And what that lets you do is, as you can see, when it gets to small, that menu turns into this. And when you click it, your menu has been transformed into this list that just drops down nicely for you. And then you can click to make it rise back up. So what it's doing is it's using this clever collapse system to go and basically always hide that this toggle button when the screen size is too big. And you'll see that is because of the Navbar toggle and the Navbar collapse. So our menu, we only have to write once, and it's just in here. It's this UL with nav and Navbar nav. We only write it once, and it transforms itself to just be inline for when it's a big screen size, and then to be a list when it's a small screen size. Probably the best idea is to really just take a look at the Get Bootstrap documentation. You can really dig into how that Navbar works. There's just so much you can do. Fix to top, yeah, exactly, yeah. So much you can do there. We'll keep moving though, because I've got a couple more things I want to show you. The alerts is probably another really cool thing. What we'll do is we'll just spin one up. So this is really great for if you've got validation messages that are global, or you want to pop up a success message or something like that. I'm going to do it right at the bottom here. Another row. And we're going to put in a div class alert. And this one is going to be alert success. And we're going to put in just a nice bit of a strong, hey there, this totally worked. I'll whack it inside a paragraph tag as well. Oop, there we go. Okay, so there you've got it. You've got this cool alert box basically here at the bottom. And probably the cooler thing about this is, yeah, sure, it's there, but you can also make it dismissible. And again, we'll head over to getbootstrap.com to check it out. Oh, not customized, sorry, JavaScript. So taking a look at the alerts, you can see that you just add this button and a data dismiss alert. So we'll grab that. Throw him in here. And straight away you can see that there's this little X, it's got a nice sort of hover, and when you click it, it disappears. And that's literally how simple it is to get something working, because you've got all that JavaScript in the background. Just go to getbootstrap.com, grab the little snippet, throw it in, and you're laughing. Probably one of the other cool things about that is it's got contextual colors as well. So I used alert success. You can go and use alert warning. It's probably a popular one as well, saying, hey, watch out, something's happening. And then you've also got danger, I think, as well. And yep, add a red one for errors and stuff like that. So that is another really cool feature that you can just throw up. And probably my favorite part now is Modals. One of the coolest things you can do in Bootstrap out of the box using the JavaScript that they provide are these modals that just work really, really cool. In fact, I'll show you a quick demo. Bang, up comes a modal. It scrolls based on the content, so you can have a ton of content in there as well. You can throw in all these different controls, these little tooltips, they're really rad. And again, make it bigger, throw in your buttons as well, and animates in and out. It's excellent. So let's dive into how that works. So there's really two key pieces here. You've got the button or whatever that will trigger the modal, and then you've got the modal itself. We'll just start with the modal. And we'll just take a quick look at how it works. So you can put this anywhere in a layout. You can put it basically anywhere on your page because it's going to be hidden. And the key to this one is the ID. So that's what your button is going to reference to load this modal up. We've got the modal base class. The fade class here just is what triggers that animation to sort of fade in and fade out. You can remove that and it'll just bang, go straight up. And then we get into the sort of the structure of the modal itself. So you've got the modal dialog, which is the container of the modal, the content, which keeps everything nicely formatted. You've got the header, which is that piece at the top here. This is the header up here with your little close button and your title. So you can see again, we've got a data dismiss modal, and that'll close down the modal. The @ times is just that little X. And we've got our H4 modal title in there, which is there. The modal body, so this is where you can put whatever you want. One of the really cool things is you can actually go fetch a different page and put it in there. We might do that in just a second. And finally the footer, where you can throw in buttons like that, the close and the save changes. Although one of my favorite design patterns, and I'm just going to fix this up, is, whoops, I prefer to have the primary action on the left of the options that you have. And rather than having a secondary button, I actually like to use Btn Link. And if you take a look when we get this up and running, I'll show you that. It's my favorite design for primary actions and then cancel buttons. All right, so that's basically the structure of the modal itself. What we'll do is just above the alert, we'll put in another a little button here saying show modal. Okay, and the key to this one is the data attribute that we're going to add. So jumping back to get Bootstrap, you can see, okay, we've got a button. This button works, you know, we're already familiar with Btn and Btn primary. I've shown you Btn large. The key to this one is the data toggle modal and the data target. Now these two attributes here, when placed on your button, the data toggle is of course just saying this is going to trigger a modal, opening a modal box. And the data target is the ID of the modal down here. So we've got my modal, and that's all you need. So I haven't really done much coding, but I'm just sort of throwing on a bit of markup. I can now refresh. I can say show modal, and bang, up it comes. I can put whatever hard-coded content I want in here. So I can say hi there. Show modal, bang, there it is. But one of the cooler ones that you can do is bring up a different page. Now the key to this is basically, and we'll just take a look down here. It's not an event, it is data remote. Yes, that's the one. So the href of the particular thing you're loading, this is really cool. So we'll swap our thing out to an A-link. We keep our data target, as you can see here, but we put in this href remote. So if we take a look at that, the beauty of these classes as well is we can turn an A-link or a button or an input into a button just by using this Btn class. And so what I'm going to do is just put in the href here. I'm just going to say go to home index and throw that into the modal. Well, let's see how we go, shall we? Brilliant. Because it's got that entire layout page in there, that's of course not going to work. But probably your best bet for this kind of thing is to use a partial view to inject it in. And we'll do that really quickly, shall we? So we'll jump into our home controller. We'll go public action result, my partial, and we'll return a partial view, and we'll call it just my partial. So where are we? We're in home. So we'll just add another view. My partial. And we'll just click the create as partial view. So in here I can say all right, we'll build that. So this is the content that I'm going to inject into the modal. This is just a route to go grab that content. And we will go to sign in. And instead of home index, we're going to go to home my partial. And with some luck, not quite. Didn't work at all. It did grab our data, so we can see that, well, this worked. Probably what it wants is all of this. Oops. Okay, let's have another crack at that. not quite working for us. What a shame. That's all right. Basically, have a crack at getbootstrap.com. Take a look at what you can do. This is really cool when you can get it to work. But I think we'll probably wrap up about there. The key things to take away from today are just go to getbootstrap.com. It's so easy to spin up a file new project and just start playing. Just get in there and do some things. You can even throw it into existing projects. Just be careful about, it is a library that will go and blitz a whole bunch of your styles, but try using it in some file new projects and just get used to how the little bits work, and then you can start plugging them into your existing applications. Or if you're lucky enough to start a new project soon, get it in there because it's going to be great. Again, go to getbootstrap.com. Just look at the documentation. It's very, very, very well documented. There's a getting started if you just want to do a bit of reading about how things work. You're going to be mostly in and out of the CSS components and JavaScript sections, just taking a look at all the different stuff. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. Please subscribe to SSW TV. It's such a good resource for all these kind of videos that we do. And I really hope you enjoyed this Bootstrap Dev Superpowers. I'm looking forward to doing one of the new Angular Dev Superpowers coming up. That'll be good. Check it out. And until next time, get coding. Thanks very much. My name's Ben Cull. I'm from SSW, and it's been great. Cheers.